Hello, and welcome back to Bella's Haven for Healing. I am truly happy to have you here. In this video of the trauma series, we will be exploring collective trauma. Have you ever noticed how one devastating event can change an entire group of people? Not just the people who were physically there, but their families, their communities, their culture, and sometimes even the generations born long after the event is over. When we hear the word trauma, we often think about something that has happened to one person, but trauma can also be experienced collectively. It can affect an entire community, an entire country, a cultural or religious group, or in some cases, nearly the entire world. The clinical definition of collective trauma is the shared psychological and emotional impact of a traumatic event or series of events that affects an entire group, community, culture, or society. It can disrupt the group's shared sense of safety, identity, trust, connection, and stability. And it can become embedded within the collective memory of that group, continuing to influence people long after the original event has ended. Now let's put that into much simpler language. Collective trauma happens when something frightening, harmful, or deeply unfair happens to a whole group of people, or continues happening over time. Even though each person may experience it differently, the group can carry shared feelings of fear, grief, anger, helplessness, or no longer feeling safe. What happened may change how people see themselves, how they see one another, and how they see the world around them. In the simplest terms, collective trauma is a deep emotional wound shared by a group of people. There have been many examples of collective trauma throughout history, and while we cannot possibly cover every event, looking at a few major examples can help us understand just how deeply these experiences can affect people, communities, and generations. World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918, caused mass death, severe injuries, food shortages, displacement, and the destruction of entire communities. More than 8.5 million soldiers died, and millions more returned home physically injured or deeply traumatized by what they had witnessed and endured. Families lost sons, husbands, fathers, and brothers. Entire countries were left grieving what became known as a lost generation. The war may have officially ended in 1918, but the grief, fear, instability, and trauma did not end when the fighting stopped. At nearly the same time, the world was facing another collective trauma. The influenza pandemic of 1918 infected an estimated 500 million people, approximately one-third of the world's population at that time. Tens of millions of people died. Many became ill and died very quickly. Families were unable to grieve in the ways they normally would, and countless children were left without one or both parents. People lived with fear of illness, fear of physical contact, medical uncertainty, isolation, and sudden, overwhelming loss. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression began. What started as an economic collapse spread throughout much of the world. People lost their jobs, businesses, farms, homes, savings, and in many cases, their ability to consistently feed their families. The Great Depression created collective wounds connected to poverty, hunger, homelessness, shame, scarcity, and financial insecurity. And this is one of the clearest examples of collective trauma eventually becoming generational trauma. People who survived the Great Depression often carried behaviors and beliefs such as never waste food, save everything, because you may need it someday. Keep working, no matter how exhausted or unhappy you are, because having a job means you are safe. Never fully trust banks or financial institutions. And always prepare for the possibility that everything could disappear in a moment without warning. Those beliefs were often taught to their children, who then taught them to their children, and even when the original danger was no longer present. World War II and the Holocaust created another enormous collective wound. People throughout the world experienced war, bombings, starvation, military occupation, forced labor, mass displacement, and the destruction of their homes and communities. During the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish people were murdered, along with millions of other people who were persecuted and killed. Families, communities, cultural traditions, and entire ways of life were destroyed. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki created another devastating layer of mass death, injury, fear, and long-term suffering. Survivors were left carrying profound grief, survivor guilt, fear of persecution, distrust of authority, displacement, and the loss of safety, identity, home, and community. In 1947, the Partition of India divided British India into India and Pakistan. More than 15 million people were believed to have crossed the newly created borders. People were forced to leave ancestral homes and communities that their families had lived in for generations. Families were separated, widespread violence followed, and many people never returned to the places they once called home. The collective wounds included forced migration, loss of homeland, family separation, religious fear, disrupted identity, and deep distrust between communities. In 1994, the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda took place over approximately 100 days. Tutsi people and Hutu people who opposed the killings were murdered on an enormous scale. Survivors were left grieving entire families while also trying to rebuild their lives and communities. In some cases, victims, witnesses, and perpetrators continued living within the same communities. The country was left carrying mass grief, terror, survivor guilt, fractured trust, cultural loss, and the incredibly difficult process of seeking justice and rebuilding community. On September 11, 2001, 2,977 people were killed in terrorist attacks within the United States. Millions of people watched the events unfold through live television and saw the footage replayed again and again. The attacks changed the shared sense of safety within the United States, while the aftermath affected people throughout the world through war, displacement, increased surveillance, discrimination, and fear of terrorism. People became afraid of flying, traveling, being inside tall buildings, or simply being in crowded public spaces. Many lived with heightened fear and hypervigilance, while first responders, survivors, families, and entire communities carried profound grief and trauma. Then, in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic affected nearly the entire world at the same time. People experienced death, serious illness, isolation, financial instability, business closures, interrupted schooling, medical fear, frontline exhaustion, and long separations from the people they loved. Many people were unable to be with family members who were sick or dying. Funerals and normal grieving rituals were delayed, restricted, or could not happen at all. Children were separated from friends, teachers, routines, and important developmental experiences. Healthcare workers faced overwhelming conditions while trying to care for enormous numbers of people. And as fear, uncertainty, changing information, and disagreement continued, trust between people, communities, medical systems, and institutions became deeply fractured. The pandemic created collective wounds involving isolation, grief without closure, fear of illness and physical contact, financial instability, medical trauma, social disconnection, and the loss of a shared sense of normalcy. These events were very different from one another. Some involved war, some involved genocide or forced displacement, some involved disease, terrorism, or economic collapse, but they all affected more than individual people. They changed the shared memory, safety, identity, beliefs, and behaviors of entire groups. And collective trauma does not mean that every person responds to an event in exactly the same way. Some people may develop severe trauma responses, others may experience grief, anxiety, anger, or changes in how they see the world. And some people may not recognize how deeply the event affected them until months or even years later. Collective trauma does not remain only in history books or shared memories. It can show up within our bodies, our emotions, our thoughts, behaviors, and spiritual lives. Let's begin with the physical and somatic symptoms. The body may experience muscle tension, headaches or migraines, chronic fatigue, difficulty sleeping, nightmares, digestive problems, changes in appetite, a racing heart, difficulty breathing, shakiness, restlessness, or become easily startled. Stress may also aggravate existing health conditions or cause physical symptoms to flare. Even after the original event has passed, the body may continue behaving as though another threat could arrive at any moment. Because history may record an end date, but the body does not always recognize that the danger is over. Emotionally and psychologically, collective trauma can appear as persistent fear or anxiety, deep grief or sadness, anger or rage, helplessness, hopelessness, shame, humiliation, guilt, or survivor guilt. Someone may feel emotionally overwhelmed one moment and completely disconnected the next. They may struggle to trust other people, authority figures, medical systems, governments, or institutions. And these emotions may not be connected only to what happened to the individual. They may also be connected to what happened to their family, their community, their culture, their country, or the people with whom they share a collective identity. Collective trauma can also affect the way we think. Someone may have difficulty concentrating, remembering information, making decisions, or organizing their thoughts. They may experience mental fog, intrusive memories or images, confusion, rumination, or find themselves repeatedly thinking about what happened. The mind may begin expecting another disaster. It may constantly scan the environment for signs of danger or automatically imagine the worst possible outcome. Over time, the experience can create beliefs such as, the world is not safe. This could happen again at any moment. No one will protect us. People cannot be trusted. Or the people in power will not keep us safe. These thoughts are often the mind's attempt to prepare for another threat before it arrives. Behaviorally, collective trauma may cause people to avoid certain places, people, situations, or reminders of what happened. They may withdraw from others, avoid crowds or travel, become afraid of medical care, or stop participating in activities they once enjoyed. Some people may compulsively watch the news or repeatedly check for updates because knowing what is happening gives them a temporary sense of control. Others may stockpile food, money, medicine, or supplies. They may become extremely rigid about routines, overwork to create financial security, or struggle whenever something feels uncertain or outside their control. There may also be changes in eating and sleeping habits, increased conflict or defensiveness, aggression, or the use of alcohol, substances, food, shopping, or other behaviors to escape or numb what they are feeling. Some of these behaviors may appear excessive when viewed outside the context of what happened, but many of them began as understandable attempts to survive, create security, or prevent the same loss from happening again. Spiritually and existentially, collective trauma can cause someone to lose their sense of meaning or purpose. They may question their faith or spiritual beliefs. They may feel abandoned by God, spirit, or the universe, angry with a higher power, spiritually disconnected, or no longer protected. They may question why so much suffering was allowed to happen. They may lose hope in humanity or struggle to imagine a future that still holds meaning. Collective trauma can also create a crisis of identity and belonging, especially when people have been displaced from their homeland, persecuted for their beliefs, or separated from their culture and ancestral traditions. The event can leave the spirit searching for safety, meaning, connection, and answers. When we return to the historical examples, we can see how these responses may continue long after the event itself. The Great Depression may appear through food stockpiling, fear of spending money, overworking, scarcity thinking, or feeling anxious even when enough resources are available. Wars and genocide may leave behind hypervigilance, nightmares, survivor guilt, fear of authority, cultural disconnection, or fear that persecution could happen again. The partition of India may continue through grief for a lost homeland, religious distrust, displacement anxiety, fractured identity, and a lingering feeling of not fully belonging anywhere. The Rwandan genocide may live on through profound grief, fear of one's neighbors, community distrust, anger, survivor guilt, and spiritual questioning. 9/11 may continue through fear of flying, public spaces, travel, or another attack, as well as hypervigilance and compulsive news watching. And COVID-19 may still appear through contamination fears, social withdrawal, medical distrust, disrupted sleep, compulsively monitoring symptoms or news, grief without closure, and questions about life, loss, and what the future will look like. The event may have ended, but the body may still be bracing. The mind may still be anticipating. The emotions may still be carrying grief. The behaviors may still be trying to create safety. And the spirit may still be searching for meaning and answers. Collective trauma becomes generational trauma when the fear, grief, beliefs, survival behaviors, silence, and unresolved pain created by the event are passed forward. The next generation may not have personally lived through the original event, but they may still inherit the lessons created by it. Do not trust outsiders. Never talk about what happened. Always prepare for the worst. Do not draw attention to yourself. Keep working no matter what it costs you. Save everything. Never allow yourself to become vulnerable. And do whatever is necessary to survive. These messages may have protected people during the original danger, but when they continue long after that danger is past, they can keep future generations living in survival mode. Healing collective trauma begins by recognizing that what happened affected more than isolated individuals. It affected bodies, families, communities, cultures, belief systems, and generations. Healing does not require us to erase history, forget what happened, or pretend that the suffering did not matter. It means allowing the grief to be acknowledged, giving language to what was once carried in silence, rebuilding safety and trust, reconnecting with culture, community, and spiritual meaning, and deciding which survival beliefs still serve us and which ones are finally ready to release. We may not be responsible for creating the collective wound, but through awareness, compassion, truth, and healing, we can help decide what is carried forward and what ends with us. Thank you for watching, and remember, always be kind.